Okay, we
Mhm.
are we are we are
Live.
we are live.
Mhm.
Hello, everybody,
Hello,
and
hello, hello.
welcome. Yeah. Welcome for this episode of Ethale Talks. Today, I will be chatting with Namibian writer and photographer Remy Ngamije, author of the book The Eternal Audience of One. He is also an editor in chief of Doc Literary Magazine and someone who is very active in the African literary scene. Remy, welcome to Ethale Talks and welcome to
Yeah.
Mozambique once again.
Thank you, Jesse, man. It's been a while since we spoke, since you yourself appeared in Duke Literary Magazine. It's been what, a year now? A year and a bit. So it's
Yeah,
good
yeah,
to be in
yeah, yeah.
conversation with you again, my brother, man. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and having me as a part of this.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. So, Remy, to start, for someone like yourself
Mm, mm,
who grew up in exile and
yeah.
dealt with identity issues,
Mm.
what does it mean being an African writer?
Nah, bruh. Being an African writer for me is very, very simple. It means that not only do I live here, it also means that I produce work from here and work about here, and that I also am involved in changing, or not changing, in discovering, changing, and developing the narrative about African literature. So I think those are my three respective struggles. I'm trying to discover whatever the authentic voice of African literature is, but then I'm also trying to shape the narrative of what I think, or what I and some creators believe that it could be, and then also building for the future, man. And I think that's what makes me, or that makes me identify as an African writer. One, place.
Mm,
I live here,
okay.
and so the things that affect me are quite different from the things that affect other writers elsewhere. You know what I'm saying? So I am a Namibian
Okay.
writer, but I am not
Mm,
a Mozambican writer, because the situation in Mozambique is very different. But you and I are both African writers, because the things that affect us here in Namibia and Mozambique on separate sides of the continent, they're
mm,
different from the things that affect writers in Australia. And so those differences, I have deep respect for them. And that's part of it that forms the identity. And then, you and me, both of us work on the continent, and working on the continent is different from working everywhere else. Literature is in many ways undervalued here. It's challenging to work in this field, but we push on. That also makes us African writers, because the challenges you and I face are different from anyone else in the world. And then, we're adding to the archive, the history of African literature. You have
mm.
this wonderful platform that captures Mozambican writing. I have one that tries to capture Namibian and African writing and writing from the diaspora. You and I are walking hand in hand in the same project, trying to get as much as we can, archive it, and so that future generations can come back to this moment and see, this is what Jesse and Remy were doing in 2021. So that makes us African writers. Place, struggle, future ambitions, and most important, just basing our work here on the continent.
Basing our work here on the continent. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. Yeah, Rem, The Eternal Audience of One, your
yeah.
debut novel, deal with different topics
Mm.
such as migration and identities. In the prologue, there are a piece written as the following. That's Vinduk. The best thing to do in the seat is arrive and leave. The mistake you want to avoid is you avoid making is trying to make the most of it.
Yeah.
My parents did that. I have not forgiven them for their sense of optimism. You will notice it in many people. There is a strange national pride I cannot explain a patriotic denial of reality. Yeah,
You went for some of my favorite lines in the prologue. Thank you so much,
okay.
Jesse.
Reading that piece, I can notice that patriotism is a concept that could be called to the conversation either to build or to destroy.
Yeah.
In the aspect of dealing with migration or migrants, what's the meaning of patriotism in your writing?
For me, I think patriotism is this very intense love of place and geography. Where you are born is what you identify. This is the place that shapes you, shapes your identity, shapes your present and future narrative. It informs your history. And I think those things are important for communities to build something that is long term. You all have to come together and agree on a common goal or a common identity in order to move forward, to survive your harsh environment and move forward into the future. So I think that aspect of patriotism is very good. But there is the opposite side, where patriotism or that sense of national identity is used to exclude other people. And so that means that you and I might be like, we're from SADC and we are SADC and proud of SADC and SADC forever, viva. And then someone from outside SADC tries to come to our community and they try to make a life for themselves. They try to live, get work, get married, have kids, go to school, basic human things. And we say, no, you are not from SADC. And therefore, because you are not from SADC, you're not entitled to the same privileges that we have. You're not entitled to the same dignity that we might have. And that, for me, is the opposite side of that nationalism aspect. So I think on the one hand, it is very good to have an intense love of place because it makes you invest in your community over and over again. It makes you defend your community. It makes you want the best for the community. But the downside is that it comes sometimes when that sense of community does not interrogate itself over time. If it doesn't ask what makes us us, what makes them them, and if it doesn't try to connect with the wider world in a meaningful way, it becomes exclusionary and people find hard to integrate. So the part that you read is something that nobody in Namibia can deny. You can't deny that it's not true. There's a sense here that everyone who is Namibian and that's cool, but everyone who's from outside is an outsider, and the degrees to which you have to go to be a part of the community are very hard. But they're also unfair. They're not the same for everybody. So if you're German, if you're white South African, if you're a British white person, if you're an American white person, you can land here and suddenly you're part of the community. But if you're black and you're from Luanda, it's not the same thing. If you're from Harare, it's not the same thing. If you're from Maputo, from Gaborone, if you're from Lagos, suddenly we put these imaginary hurdles in your place where you have to prove yourself to be part of us, but all of these other races and nationalities do not. And so those are the things that, I ask about myself, not only when I was writing about that, but also now to this day, like, why do we exclude other people, especially when all of them in some ways are here for the same thing? Nobody who comes to Namibia comes here because it is easy. They come here because it is a little bit better than the struggles that they might be facing somewhere. And if you have that sense of humanity of like, these people are here because wherever they come from, it's just very hard. And if we can, through our life, through our community, make them a little bit more welcome, I feel like that for me is, I think, the true spirit, one of the true spirits of Pan-Africanism. And that patriotism thing, that thing of thinking of locally, just intense local community, that's not, I think, my spirit. And you can see that with Duk. Not only do we publish Namibians, because that is important, but it is important for us to know what writers in Mozambique are writing. What are they thinking about? What are the stories that they value? It is important for us to connect with writers in Jamaica, Black writers in Jamaica, because we want to know, what are these Black people thinking about? And I think together we can uplift the whole sense of Black identity. So, for me, all of these labels, Namibian, African, whatever, all of these are really, for me, subservient to Black identity. And that, for me, is what's important,
Yeah, reading your book, it's possible to notice that the migrants needed to follow a certain etiquette,
Yeah.
if one forget that etiquette, the life won't be easier.
Yeah.
This is why there is a piece in your book. I think the piece says something like an average of immigrant family will diligently collect the trapping of their surroundings to in and impress. The language, a house, a car, a dog, few things matter more than winning the war of memories.
Yeah.
According to my experience, there are spaces where being immigrant matter than others. I would like to know if do you think so? If there are places where being immigrant it's very important or matters than other places, or being immigrant means only being immigrant.
I don't know. I haven't yet found a place where being an immigrant automatically means that your quality of life is better. There is always a struggle that's involved. When you're not from a community, when you're not from a place, there's always a struggle that's involved to get integrated, to become part of that community. So I haven't yet experienced that. So I can't give you a very wide, expansive answer because mine is limited. Everywhere I've lived, everywhere I've been, there's always been that struggle to integrate. And that etiquette, yeah.
I was trying to think the difference between immigrant and investor, for example.
My
Investor is
friend.
someone who comes to
Oh,
invest
man.
and develop a community. And
Oh, man.
immigrant is someone who always try to escape his condition and
Well, yeah,
go
I
to
hear
live
you.
in other
I hear you.
realities. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I hear you. So all of those things, there are all of these levels. You have first the understanding of refugee. A refugee is someone who has left their home country because their home country is dangerous to their life. And so they have come to another country to seek refuge, i.e., they've said, this place, I can't live there because my life is in danger. Can you take me in? That's the first level. Then the second is what we call an immigrant, someone who leaves their country not because things are bad there, but because they want a different life. They want something different. They want to be in a different community, or they dream or they aspire to be in a different community. That's also immigrant. Now, both refugees and immigrants are migrants, i.e., they're people who've moved from their place. And then you have, expats. Expats are people who is a label that is used to define people who have left their home country, moved to another country, and they live and they work there. And the assumption is that the expats are adding value to that country. That's where that whole an investor, foreign investors comes from.
Okay.
Now, all these three people have left their countries, they're living abroad, but for some reason, the last one, expat, foreign investor, is given a high status. The question is why? Because if you look at the situations all of them find within their community, all three might be working, all three might be adding value to the community, but for some reason we welcome one and not the other. So really it's a question of money. If you get money, you get a better quality of life and we treat you better and we welcome you to our community, regardless of whether that money that you bring in is sustainable or long term. In Namibia, that expat term, really on expert foreign investor, only applies to white people. For some reason, it does not apply to Angolans. But Angolans are in the country spending money, building the economy. They're part of it, but it doesn't apply to them. Why? What's the reasoning over there? For me, it comes down to nothing more than just a question of race, where black people who move abroad are always classified as less, whereas white people who move abroad are somehow seen as adding value to a place. And that's not necessarily true. Jesse, you could land here in Windhoek and you could start something that we've never seen, and that thing could add value to our lives. By virtue of you having come from Mozambique, we can learn something from you. You see, I don't necessarily think that just because you're here and you're black, you're automatically a migrant or a refugee. But for some reason, if you're white and you're from London and you come to Windhoek, it's, everyone just starts, ululating and celebrating. But and that person from London, when you ask, what do you do here? What is your value? What is it that you add to the community? Oftentimes it's plastic stuff. It's not substantial or meaningful. And you wonder why we continuously denigrate ourselves and think our brothers and sisters from wherever they come from in Africa, especially Black Africa, why we don't treat them with the same status and dignity. And so for me, Jesse, I've never been to a place where my status as a Black immigrant is the same as a white immigrant. I've never experienced it. So I can't say that it exists if I haven't seen it. And I haven't seen it for a whole lot of other Black people. I don't know one Black person who's moved abroad or moved to another country and they've been given the same status as, let's say, a white immigrant. All of us are here in migration for the same thing, a better life for us, for our children, for our families. And that really is the smallest threshold, Jesse. They're not asking for a lot. People in migration don't ask, they're just asking for something slightly better, because wherever it is that they're coming from, it's probably a challenging circumstance. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Remy, you are a storyteller. The eternal audience of one is your book, and I love it to read it. I use it to travel a lot from Windhoek to Cape Town, from Cape Town to Windhoek. I crossed some borders and I dealt with some difficult issues that usually happens in our borders, and it was really an amazing experience reading your book. And thank you for that, and thank you for sharing with
Jesse,
us
you will understand what happens at borders, man. You will understand how things go down at borders. It's not the same for everybody. It is not the same for everybody. And unless you've experienced that, you just won't understand.
So Remy, do you think that telling stories in the way that you do, you are a writer, you are also a photographer, you are also a journalist, you are editor-in-chief of Duke Literary Magazine. Do you think that telling stories is a way of connecting people or different people in a diverse humanity?
I think everything that you just said is very true. I think stories connect people. They help share an understanding of the world that one person might not necessarily have, but another does. I think stories achieve that. Not one story by itself, but all the stories together. I don't think my story is going to change how people think about immigrants. But I think all the stories about immigration could help people understand what it is that immigrants are going through. So I think one by itself is too weak to change a narrative, but together all of them do. And so for me, in writing the story, it wasn't that I think it's going to make situations easier for Jesse when he goes to South Africa. I don't think that story is going to do that. But maybe the hope is if more people read this story and they read others like it, maybe the society at ground level, these conversations will be had. And then those conversations grow and they build into questions. They build into societal policy that maybe we need to change our systems, and maybe we need to change our communities, and maybe we need to change our laws. And then maybe in the long term, someone like Jesse can go to South Africa and not be subjected to xenophobic treatment. So I don't think one story by itself is strong enough, but all of the stories, all the books ever written will probably help shift the human narrative. And I think that's what I think all genuine storytellers have that hope that together, what we're writing, what we're curating in terms of human creativity is changing the human narrative one little bit. That maybe if we understand what people go through war, maybe we will think twice about engaging in it. Maybe if we do not want immigrants in our community, then we should not engage in behaviors that makes a place uninhabitable for people. You know what I'm saying? So maybe we should live and let live. Maybe we should not persecute people. Maybe we should not discriminate. The hope really is that stories help to spark that question. And then if you ask that question, well, then now it demands an answer. The answer won't come by itself. The answer will come through action. And you really, really hope that the action moves us one step forward. Yeah. So that's me, man. I don't think my story is going to change the world, but maybe it'll affect one reader, just one reader. And then maybe that one reader will speak to another person and their viewpoint has been changed. I think if you can do that with one, you've succeeded in telling a story.
So your story will affect one reader, and you also highlighted that it's very important when all stories about migration cross, and all stories together will probably help us to understand how we see migration, or how the humanity or people see migration. So are you speaking about crossing different stories on the same topic? And I know that you cross different kinds of artistical disciplines. As I said before, you are a photographer, a journalist, a writer, and you do different things. But so probably people don't know, but I know that you also love dancing. Yeah. You also love dancing, and that is my favorite part. Yeah, knowing that you also love dancing. So my question is, how these artistic expressions cross in your writing? How do you transform the writing to become a space where different artists they cross?
Yeah. Let's start with maybe the simplest one that I think I can explain well, dancing. Dancing is this magical thing that you do when you hear a nice song, your body starts moving and you do this thing that you don't ordinarily do in the course of your day. So nobody wakes up and dances, or when you're at work, you're sitting down, you're not dancing. But when music happens, your body starts moving and you start expressing your ways in ways that you do not ordinarily express yourself in. The goal really is that when you're dancing and the music is nice, you become a different person. It transports you out of yourself. I think when you have a good story in your head and you start writing that story, you also get transported out of your head and into that story. Now, where the two are similar is that if you're dancing with a person, your responsibility as one dancer is to give the other dancer a good experience, to make sure that the 5 minutes of song are pleasurable, that they're enjoyable. Think about kizomba. If you're dancing with somebody, you want to give your partner a very good kizomba dance. You want them to be led properly. You want them to have an opportunity to style and move their hands and their hair and their hips in a nice way. And then when the song is over, they're going to be like, Jesse, thank you for the dance. I had fun. This was a good song. Thank you. You know? The same thing with writing. You want your reader to have a nice experience, an exciting experience reading your story. You want them to be moved. You want them to be transported to a different geography or a different world. You want them to be entertained, maybe to laugh. Maybe you want to educate them or show them something that they would not otherwise learn. Maybe you want to validate the experience and show them that what they're experiencing is not singular, that they're not alone. You do this for the reader and you're the writer. So you're like in this dance, but with words, but you're also dancing, but you don't know each other and you've never met, but you're still in this weird dance. for me, that is a good way to explain, for example, why when I approach my writing, I'm really thinking about the reader. I'm thinking about what's Jesse going to feel when he reads this? What's he going to think? What's he going to wonder? And then once he reads it and he wonders about this thing, is that thing going to be meaningful for him? Is that going to entertain him? Is that going to make him laugh? Really, it's like a dance between the reader and the writer. That's the best I can explain using the dance metaphor. But for me, dancing is also just, it's another way to be alive, man. I mean, you gotta dance, you gotta move, you gotta enjoy music. Do you dance, Jesse?
Really? No, I'm not good in dancing, but I love see people dancing.
Yeah. Shall I tell you something? Shall I tell you something?
Okay.
If you see people dancing and you see them and they're moving and it brings you joy and you smile, that is a sign that you want to dance. So you must go and dance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Remy, we about to finish our episode, or this episode of Ethale Talks, and I would like to ask you to say some ideas or stories that comes up when you listen the name Mozambique.
Have you heard of this amazing writer called Virgilia Fra?
Yes.
Virgilia, she was part of Afrolit Sans Frontiers, and she read an incredible story that was very, very amusing. And she's just from watching her session, I was really interested in her work, and I try to get her work in English, but I haven't yet been able to do so here. And then Mia Couto. Is he Mozambican? Yeah, he's Mozambican.
Yes.
Yeah, I've read some of his works, and he's pretty cool. And then the other one that I have access to within English is he's not Mozambican, but he lives in Mozambique.
Okay,
Agoluz. Yeah. So unfortunately, a lot of Portuguese writers from the continent aren't translated into English. And so we're limited to a lot of them. But there's this other incredible writer. I don't know whether you know him. He lives in Mozambique, and was published in Duke. And his name is Jessemusse Cacinda. I don't know whether you know this guy. Do you know this guy?
No, I don't know this guy.
Yeah, but he's very good. And his short story in Duke was amazing. Very good descriptions, very good narration of human drama, and very, very, very good rhythm and poetry in his language. So I don't know whether you know Jesse, but you should look up his work. You should look up Jessemusse's work.
Okay. I will look up. Okay, so then thank you for joining us. So let me give you some minutes to say your last statements.
No, thank you so much for having me, Jesse, for considering me, for giving me this platform.
Thank you, Remy, and I also would like to congratulate you for your lovely book, for the lovely book you wrote, and I wish you all the best. The Eternal Audience of One is a incredible and an amazing book, and I can't wait to read it again in Portuguese, so probably I will understand better. I
We
think I
hope,
will
man.
understand better if I read it in Portuguese. I can't wait for that. And congratulations. I wish you all the best. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jesse.
Okay.